Hello and welcome back to the High Vibe Penny podcast, the space where power meets peace, frequency meets finesse, and next level impact is created through inner calibration, not outer performance. I'm your host, Katie Rogers, soul-led leadership and legacy coach for high-performing, heart-led women who are done performing their power and are ready to embody it. This space is for the woman who knows she's built for more and isn't willing to burn for it. Together, we explore identity, emotional capacity, somatic leadership, and the subtle energetics that make you magnetic. This isn't surface strategy, it's frequency first evolution. So let's get into it. Today's guest is a woman who leads with both tenderness and truth. She is a feminine empowerment coach, love and leadership mentor, host of the Feminine Frequency podcast, and author of The Feminine Way. I'm joined by Amy Natalie, whose work is rooted in helping women create secure, self-led relationships by reclaiming their feminine energy, healing attachment patterns, and reconnecting with their body's wisdom. Amy's story is one of radical self-trust. At 27, she walked away from a marriage that no longer fit and made the powerful choice to choose herself for the first time. She's moved through burnout, reconnected with her sensuality, and built a life and business aligned with safety, softness, and soul. And today we're diving into what it takes to cultivate secure attachment in love and how it's connected to feminine embodiment, emotional regulation, and rewriting the internal narratives that block intimacy. If you've ever found yourself performing for love, shrinking your needs, or swinging in between independence and longing, this one is going to land. Amy, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh my goodness, I've been so looking forward to this. I love listening to your podcast and I love your energy. So I'm excited to see what we co-create today in this conversation.
Yeah, likewise. And your personal story is just such a transmission. So many incredible things that happen that sort of, in some ways, like fast track your spiritual evolution, right? When you go through all of these experiences. So I would love if you could just walk us through some of these moments where you first decided, hey, I'm going to choose myself and I'm going to move into this new way of being.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can say there's like life before I went through my divorce and life afterwards is really the biggest turning point in my life. And there's been many different points after that where my life has continued to evolve and lots of growth and evolution. So I think for the purposes of today's conversation, there's so much here in the realm of relationships, which is something that I love teaching about and love speaking about because this has been an area that has not always been easy for me. So prior to going through my divorce, which we'll just name that happened, and prior to that, I was in my mid-20s and I ended up choosing a relationship that felt very safe and comfortable and familiar based on what my family and what my culture would have wanted for me. So I grew up in a more traditional religious home from a Jewish tradition. And it was very, very, very important for my family, one of their top values, that I marry someone who was a Jewish man. And when I was younger, I tended to date men who were not in my religion, and it created a lot of friction with my parents. And so I found myself in a time in my life where I was like graduated from college, not really sure what direction I wanted to go, and I was struggling with anxiety and depression, and I found this really safe relationship and wonderful man. However, at the time when I met him, I didn't really know myself. I met him when I was 23.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know who I was outside of the construct of what I like to call the good girl persona that I was playing, the people pleaser, the perfectionist, the one who really just wanted approval from the external world. So we got married, and even throughout our relationship, I started to get those intuitive pings, and they would come to me in the form of anxiety, of something feels off here. They would come
Mm.
to me in the form of stomach aches. I was getting really bad inflammation in my body. They would come to me in the form of not being able to lose weight. Like my body was actually responding to what was happening because I had this internal stressor of something feels off and I don't know that this path is right for me.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I really started to dive deeper into my spiritual practices, into meditation, into yoga, into understanding personal development, and taking a look at, okay, what actually feels right for me? And how did I end up here in a place where I kind of felt like I had created this perfect life on the outside, but inside I was really struggling in a lot of ways. So that really led me to this place of making the hardest decision in my life of deciding to end my marriage with someone that I did deeply care about. And it was the first time in my life where I really chose myself, where I was like, this is what's right for me. And I need to trust this and I need to follow this. And that was really the starting point of who becoming who I am today.
Yeah, so beautiful and so much wisdom in how you share of you were getting these pings, the body was signaling to you, hey, something doesn't feel good here. And by being able to come to a space of like, oh, okay, I think I'm getting it. Like, oh, okay, I'm understanding that this is a communication to me. And I think often people can just be somewhat blind to that, be like, why is this all happening to me? This is like, why is things so difficult? And when you get to see that, oh, this is my spiritual evolution. Now, how do I use this? And I love how you called in this presencing of the good girl conditioning, because to be the good girl, you do want to please everyone. You do want to meet everyone's expectations. You do want to be like, for example, in my history, it's like how to be the perfect girlfriend, the perfect partner, the perfect sister, the perfect daughter, like all the things. And to be able to choose yourself and hey, I'm going to disappoint some people here. I'm gonna really ruffle some feathers with this. That takes so much courage to lead you away from that good girl conditioning. So, yeah, I really want to honor your courage and your strength in that, and just the beauty of the alignment of let me create something that actually feels good to me.
Thank you. Thank you for seeing that. And yeah, I would say that most people will stay in situations that are out of alignment for them, and they will use things like alcohol, shopping, emotional eating, numbing, distracting themselves, anything other than having to make a change because the
Yeah,
fear of making the change feels like such a big threat to our ego. It's like, am I even going to survive? And I had to get to that place of deep sovereignty within myself where I was willing to lose it all. I was like, it is possible that my parents could disown me,
yeah,
but there was a possibility that I was going to upset everyone that I loved.
yeah,
And I had to be willing to take that risk and trust myself so much that I was no longer willing to abandon myself and my own well-being. And I recognized that me being inauthentic and me not being truthful to myself actually isn't serving other people. We
yeah,
think but we can't actually make other people happy. And the people who really care about us and who really want the best for us, ultimately, at the end of the day, they want you to be happy too. They don't
mm,
want you to suffer or struggle.
yeah,
So I think that's a really key point of like getting to that place of deep inner self-trust and confidence and self-love to be like, I am going to choose myself and there will still be people who love me and who support me, but I have to do this for myself, regardless of what the outcome is. And that's a really scary place to be, I think, specifically for us as women, going out into the world and being like, I'm going to do this on my own, no matter what.
yeah. Oh yeah, and the mind will tell you like, hey, you'll lose everything in this process. And actually, sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. But we can sometimes create this idea of change is so scary, it's so big, and then we forget that actually staying exactly the same can be so scary and so not what you want also. So it becomes this question of, well, if I'm going to feel scared, then what do I choose? If regardless, it's going to be hard, which hard am I going to choose that really serves and supports me? So yeah, just honoring the 27-year-old version of you that said, yeah, it's going to be hard and I choose myself. So thank you for that. And
Mm.
what a beautiful way to flow into this sense of attachment style, because you mentioned about the ways that people love you when you show up kind of inauthentically or from a space of pleasing. And for those of us who are listening who are new to attachment styles, can you give us a run through of sort of where we're going and what that kind of looks like before we kind of get into it in a bit more juicy detail?
Yeah, totally. So I've been learning about attachment theory for, I would say, the last maybe 5 or 6 years. And this theory is rooted in psychology. There was a researcher and a psychologist in the 20th century who started researching this information. And essentially, what they were looking at is how does our upbringing and our relationship with our primary caregiver when we're younger, usually our mom or a caretaker or our father, whoever were our primary caretakers, how does that relationship end up impacting or shaping the way that we relate as adults, specifically in romantic relationships?
Mhm.
Because there's this piece of safety. When we are children, we fully have to rely on our parents to survive or our primary caregiver. So we will often change our behavior to make sure that we accommodate to what our parents' needs are so that we receive the love, safety, and care that we need. So it makes sense when we're younger that we adapt to our environment to make sure that we don't lose that connection that we actually need to survive, right? And
Mhm.
so when we become adults and we are relating in romantic relationships, when you're in a romantic relationship, the most intimate relationship that we have, other than our relationship with ourself, which I'm going to talk about today,
Yeah.
is we end up projecting our safety and security onto our romantic partners in the same way that we did when we were younger. So, unless your parents or your primary caregiver was secure within themselves, unless they were fully present, unless they had the emotional intelligence and the tools to be a conscious parent, which even in that case, we can't have all of our needs met by our parents, especially when we can't communicate our needs when we're younger. But like
Yeah.
that would be best case scenario of having really healthy relationships, healthy attachment is if you had a really present parental figure when you were younger, right?
Mhm.
And so we can see there's a wide range. You may not have had a horrible childhood, but there were still dynamics of receiving love. And then on the other end of the spectrum is, people who did have traumatic upbringings and really challenging childhoods, which, creates more intensity in the way that our nervous system gets imprinted when it comes to attachment theory. So that's kind of like the foundation of it. And there are technically three different types, well, four different types of attachment, and we can go into that in a second. But really, the way that my mentor teaches it is there's really only two categories. Either you are securely attached or you are insecurely attached. And the
Mhm.
cool thing is that you can learn to be securely attached when you're able to identify that you are running patterns in relationships that are not serving you or that are not healthy.
Mhm. Beautiful. I love that. And this sense of like attached or like, sorry, securely attached or insecurely attached. And it's
Yep.
sort of, we can become identified in that sometimes when we have a title for it. And then it's also creating the capacity to be like, just because it is this way now, it doesn't tell you anything about how it could be in the future, or just because this is the way with this particular partner doesn't necessarily tell you if you are, like, let's say, insecurely attached, that you will be that in every situation forever also.
Yeah, and that's why what I wanted to bring up today. I think sometimes when we get into things like, let's say, astrology or human design, or when we get into these Enneagram and we have these different types,
Mm.
sometimes we can get overly identified with them, and then we say, "Oh, I am an anxious attached person. I
Mhm.
am a avoidant attached person. I am a disorganized attached person." And then we identify with that and that becomes almost like a personality thing. But
Mm.
something that's really interesting to note is that your attachment style can actually change the way that it presents with different partners and with even in friendships.
Yeah.
So I've had experiences throughout my dating life where I generally ran anxiously attached, and I'll share a little story on that so people can understand what that may look like. However, with my ex-husband, I ran avoidant attached. And
Hmm.
so it's a little bit confusing because it's like, okay, but which one am I? And if we come back to the foundation of, oh, secure attached or unsecure attached, that just gives us so much information.
Yeah.
And going back to what I said before, is like you can be unsecure attached and learn how to come back to your center of secure attachment faster. So that's
Mm.
that's the work that I do is really from an embodiment and from a nervous system perspective. How do I come back home to myself and show up as my adult self instead of as, my younger child version of myself in this relationship?
Yeah, so beautiful. I love how you named, sometimes we can identify with those things. And if you identify with it, congratulations, you get to keep it. And so I think sometimes even, things like the Enneagram, it gives you an idea of like, oh, this isn't who I am. This is just sort of like the software programming that I'm running. And when you can become a little bit more aware of what that looks like, it's, oh, I'm running the programming for anxiously attached, or I'm running the programming for the shadow side of an Enneagram 3, for example. And then it's like you get to name it, wake up out of it, and then you're no longer identified in it, that it creates the space that you get to witness it and then choose how you want to move from there. So I love your yeah, I love your pointing to that and just naming that is really powerful. So you mentioned about the ways that our attachment style shows up and not just in romantic relationships, but you mentioned other spaces as well, and it can even be, in business with your clients. And so I think this is why it's really powerful to learn about this. And you mentioned anxious attachment too, but you also mentioned there are four. So I'm wondering, can you share with us a little bit more about what the others are too, and
Yeah,
like a bit more
totally.
about what an anxious attachment would look like?
Yep. Yeah, we can go through all of them. So securely attached is that you can be in connection with other people. And if they pull away or if they're clingy with you, you can still stay in your center and be able to communicate your boundaries, being able to
Mm,
communicate your needs, and being able to do that from a regulated and from a I would say mostly calm space, right?
mm,
That would be securely attached, right? And we can just consider that as like mature adult relating when we have the skills to be able to do that. Okay.
yeah.
Then we have, like I mentioned, anxious attached. And anxious attached, if we think about the energetics of it, it's more of a clinging or a leaning in of needing more love, attention, care from your partner than what you feel you are currently getting. So, anxious attachment can often look like if maybe you meet someone that you're really attracted to, and this often comes up very early on in the dating experience, but it also does show up in more in-depth relationships, long-term relationships. So, for example, you meet someone, you feel really excited about them, you kind of create maybe a little bit of like a fantasy in your head, like this is, this person's amazing, but I just met them. And
Yeah.
then you're waiting by your phone because you're waiting for their response, or you are feeling panicky about when are we going to see each other next. And what can happen in this anxious attachment is that it takes us completely out of our center and it's very distracting. So it kind of hijacks our system of so much energy and attention is going towards, do I feel safe in this connection? And it takes us out of me as an individual human being. Before I met this person, I was living my life. I was running my business. I was doing my
Yeah.
job. I was hanging out with my friends. I was doing all these things I was passionate about. But then very quickly, I start to fixate, hyperfixate on this relationship or this challenge that I'm experiencing in a relationship. So that would be more of the anxious attachment.
Mm,
And we see this when they did studies on this with little kids, which is where the research comes from, that when parents would leave the room then kids would cry, they would have an outburst, or they would, constantly think about their parents until they came back in the room, right? So that's anxious attached. Then we have avoidant attached, which is almost the opposite energetically. So avoidant attached, you can kind of think of, okay, the parent leaves the room and the kid kind of just turns their back and is like, oh, I don't need you kind of thing. It's like the hyper
Mhm.
independent. And avoidant attached people tend to like a lot of space in relationships, and they tend to feel very smothered when someone is, they feel like someone's needing more of their energy and attention. And I think oftentimes avoidant attached people get like the worst rep because they might be like, oh, people think, oh, they're just emotionally shut down or they're not good at communicating. But really, both anxious and avoidant are insecure attachment, right?
Yeah.
And avoidant and anxious are just safety protection mechanisms that we have when we don't feel safe in relationships. And then the last one is going to be disorganized attached, which is essentially a mix between avoidant and anxious. Sometimes this can be like passive aggressive in a way where it's like, oh, I really want to be close to this person, but because they haven't messaged me, I'm just not going to message them. I'm going to pull away a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Or maybe it might present sometimes you feel really anxious and sometimes you feel really avoidant, and you kind of vacillate between those two. So those are the four different styles.
Yeah, beautiful. I love this explanation of them and really helps us see how they might be showing up in like different areas and spaces of our lives as well. And how, yeah, as you say, it might be very easy as humans. We want to understand things a little bit. We want to quantify it. And so sometimes it's very easy for us to try to label it as good or bad. But when you get to see it as like, hey, these are just innocent survival mechanisms or coping mechanisms that we learn and we do the best that we know how to do with them until we sort of do our work around learning to create this sense of secure attachment styles that leads to more emotional mature levels in relationship, however you have that relationship. So yeah, really beautiful. And I want to draw it into this space of when we are disconnected from our feminine energy, how does that contribute into the insecure attachment styles?
Yeah, I love this question. I love that you're tying this in because, as you know, this is like the core body of my work is really understanding, masculine, feminine energetics and helping women to be more empowered with their feminine energy. So, for the purposes of this conversation, I will just share that when you're connected with your feminine energy, you are deeply connected with your body and
Mm.
you are also deeply connected with your emotions. So, if we are stuck in an attachment pattern, we may get stuck in overthinking, overanalyzing, trying to figure out the solution to the problem, and staying very much, like I might say, in the from the neck up.
Yeah.
But if we can learn how to drop into the body and notice, ooh, I feel some tightness around my chest right now. I feel my heartbeat is beating really quickly. I notice that I feel really numb or I feel really shut down right now. So it starts by being able to track the sensations in your body, which is actually a skill that everyone can learn.
Yeah.
And as we start to track these sensations in our body and we start to learn, oh, how can I actually create more grounding, more connection to myself? Then what happens is we can start to come back into our power of, oh, okay, what are my needs that are not being met? What have I not communicated? Does this relationship actually feel aligned or healthy for me to continue engaging with? We
Mm.
can come back to like when we're in a survival pattern, our prefrontal cortex is not online. We can't make good decisions, right? We can't access what that is. So learning how to track the sensations in your body, and then also learning how to move energy through your body through what I like to call emotional alchemy,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of people will be like, oh my God, I feel so anxious. And then they will either, take a medication, or
Mm.
they will drink a glass of wine, or they will smoke some weed, or whatever it is to try to make that feeling go away. And
Yeah.
I've been there. That was much of my life, numbing, distracting, avoiding, emotional eating. Like that was my reality,
Yeah.
right? And once I learned to see that these emotions are actually messengers, they're information, and how can I actually learn how to hold space and to be present with these emotions and these sensations in my body? And then once I'm present with them, how can I learn to move that energy and honor that energy to be able to then express it? Because when we suppress our emotions, that creates depression. We suppress our real, true, authentic selves. So we really want to go from this suppressing and numbing state to expressing and honoring what
Yeah.
our emotions are trying to tell us.
Oh, beautiful. And it's, again, these innocent patterns that we follow into of like, oh, this feels bad. So let me just go to the fridge. Let me just go to and it's so unconscious and so ingrained that sometimes you don't notice that you're doing it. And I'd be all for it if it worked, but sadly it does not. And what I love how you named as well is something that came up in the last podcast episode as well. This idea of like never trust your mind when your body is dysregulated. So those
Yeah.
signs that are coming up that's showing you, wait, I'm not so resourced now. I'm not so grounded now. And my mind is saying, hey, why don't you just text him? Why don't you just show up at his house? Or like whatever it is that's coming up for you. Okay, what if I could create space between myself and this thing? What if I could honor and feel this emotion through, which is it's such a powerful skill. And yet something I certainly didn't learn until I was in my 30s is something we're not taught in school. And often many of us didn't have emotionally regulated or emotionally mature enough parents to be able to pass us on that skill. And it is true wealth. It is true wisdom that just changes your life and the people around you. So I love to see you as the embodiment of this work and how you're sharing this ripple throughout the world as well. So yeah, you're speaking my language. I'm so here for all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, emotional alchemy, especially, for me, I consider myself a very sensitive being. I've been sensitive my whole life. I've had big emotions my whole life. And
Yeah.
I didn't really have, my parents didn't know how to hold those emotions. It was like, okay, go to your room until you've calmed down, or, you don't need to cry right now. It's okay. And they were doing the best that they could, but I was never taught. And like you said, we're not taught these tools in school, which I really wish that we were. But,
Mm,
as adults, we now have the opportunity to become more empowered with our emotions. And especially for us as women, as feminine beings, having a hormonal cycle, we have more, I think, more work to do in this area. Men as well, but I think that we are more, we have a lot more sensitivity to our emotions and the
mm,
fluctuations in our emotions. So yeah, this is such a powerful tool. And to give an example, I've had clients who went from being in this, oh my God, I need to leave this relationship. I need to end this relationship. I feel way too anxious right now. I'm going to reach out and like, I need to have a conversation right now with my partner. We do one session where I help them to get in touch with their emotions, get in touch with their body, help them to move through that, do some inner child healing, process those
mm,
emotions. And within 30 minutes to an hour, they come back to their center, and then they can actually have the real conversation that they want to have with their partner. And one of my clients, she actually ended up breaking up with her partner and sharing with him why that was. She was really honest. She was like, I love you, and these are some of the things that are not working. They continue to not work for me. And he really took that to heart and he worked on that.
Mm.
And they didn't necessarily have an intention to get back together, but 6 months later, they ended up seeing each other again. And he had been doing a lot of inner work during that time. And they got back together and they have a really beautiful relationship right now. So, we never know what's going to happen, but really all that we have control over is doing our own work
Yeah.
to be with ourselves, to honor ourselves, and then to communicate from a place of truth and love so that our partners can meet us if they're able to meet us. And if not, then that also gives us information of like, okay, maybe this isn't the right relationship and I can learn from this and I can, move forward from a place of knowing more clearly what I want and need in partnership.
So gorgeous. I love that. This sense of, yeah, you don't do your work for trying to create anyone else to be any different for you to be okay. Like you do your work for you to be okay. And also you set the standard of like, this is what I'm available for. This is what my needs are. And actually I don't think they're too much anymore. And that can often be the case with women thinking their emotions are too much or their needs are too much. And to be in a space where you can honor that and say, hey, actually, this is what I'm available for, and I know I'm worthy of receiving that. I always say to my clients, the universe isn't on a budget. You can ask for that.
Yeah.
But when you
Yeah.
come to this space of like grounded resource and being able to communicate that in a space where it's not like I'm going to make you the bad guy and I'm the good guy or make it into some kind of dynamic like that. Actually, I'm just going to hold my truth, what I'm available for, what would really serve me in this. And I'll communicate it in that way. And you get to see very clearly, you collect your data if somebody is available for that or they're not. And
Mhm.
I love how you share as well about this sense of sometimes we don't necessarily know how to listen inward and to see, wait, am I creating an upper limit on this situation as well? Like, am I now so anxious that I want to get out of it? I want to cut and run. Or, I feel a sense of real urgency around this. To be able to ground in and regulate and understand we're multidimensional humans with multidimensional parts, and you will hold um, so many opinions, so many of them conflicting as well. So being able to navigate that through emotional alchemy, through self-mastery, to be able to create the dynamic that you really want to hold in this world is just such a gift.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the word urgency, and I think that is like so spot on. If you are feeling like having a conversation with your partner or someone you're dating or with a friend feels urgent, I invite you to really slow down and take time to get more grounded and regulated within yourself because urgency is reactivity. And when we are responding from that place of urgency, we often make decisions that are not actually grounded in, like you said, the bigger picture. We can't see the whole vision. We're just really tunnel vision of like, this thing happened and this is how I'm responding to it versus, oh, okay, let me really sit with this and let me get to that place of inner peace as much as I can or inner clarity and then decide, okay, what is the conversation that needs to take place? What is the action that I need to take from here? But always noting, yeah, if there's this urgency, just slow down a little bit and take some time before you have whatever conversation that you're wanting to have.
I'm loving this sense of slowness. And as you named so beautifully, like this sense of moving from your head, like from above the neck to below as well, is so
Mhm.
powerful in moving into more of that place where you can experience that secure feeling. Um, I wanted to know, what did it feel like for you when you started shifting, and what do you notice in your clients as well, where you start to shift from that sort of survival based relating into that more secure connection? How does that feel?
Yeah, it's so different. Like the relationship, I'll start with first, just like romantic relationship that I have with my partner. There's so much more intimacy and depth and trust that can be built when I would say both people have the ability to self-regulate and then come into communication because then there are less likely to have miscommunication, less likely for things to say for people to say things that they don't actually mean, less likely to have to be guessing or feeling like you're walking on eggshells with a partner. There's a lot more honesty available because instead of the relationship being rooted in, I need you in order to feel safe,
Mm.
it's rooted in, oh, I am my own person, you are your own person. And we both know, even though it would be hard if our relationship ended, and it's not to say that that wouldn't have an emotional effect, but knowing deep down that both of us would be okay, it takes away the pressure of the relationship and it allows for just more honesty, is what I'll say. And so the level of intimacy that's available increases when there's a lot of trust, when you know that your partner is going to communicate when something doesn't feel good instead of avoiding saying it because they don't want to hurt your feelings or they're afraid that, oh, if I say this, it might mean that the relationship is not going to be okay. So that's one way that I see it. And I would say it also offers just a lot more peace and empowerment for when challenges or conflicts do come up. Because inevitably in life, there are going to be times where you feel anxious or you feel stressed or you feel overwhelmed. And to know that you can navigate that with the tools to help you to regulate yourself and come back to center, it takes out these huge highs and lows that we often experience in relationships and life. And then even in my friendships and relationships with women, that has been a huge journey for me. And similarly, it has allowed me to, I would say, even be more honest and more discerning about, okay, which relationships feel really nourishing and supportive and feel mutual and feel expansive for me versus which relationships am I holding on to because I've been friends with them for a long time or because I don't want to hurt their feelings, but really that relationship isn't necessarily serving either of us. So it has enhanced the quality of my
Mm.
relationships with other women and the depth that I can go with them because I really trust the people that I am interacting with. And you mentioned earlier, around business, we can have a secure attachment with money or we can have an insecure attachment with money. We can have a secure attachment with our clients and our business or an insecure attachment. And the way that I'll describe it is that I just feel so much more trusting and at peace, and I'm able to recover faster when things happen, when maybe my cash flow isn't where I wanted it to be, or when I have client turnover. Like it's not as big of a deal. It doesn't freak me out as much. And even if I start to feel those feelings, I can create that grounding within myself and then I can take inspired action and do the things that are going to help to move things forward and get the results that I want to get instead of spiraling, swirling, feeling stuck, feeling doubtful, right? It's like, oh, can I come back to my center and that deep trust and knowing that I've got me and also the universe has me. Like I'm fully supported in this moment and I'm always supported and guided. So yeah, having that deeper trust within self and your higher power, I think is something that can happen when we become more regulated.
Oh, I love that so much. And this talk about self-trust is just giving me like full body chills. And I think that's what it comes back to is this sense of like, yeah, we can project our stuff onto everything. And I always say, relationships, money, entrepreneurship are such beautiful vehicles for transformation because what is within you is difficult to see looking inwards. So it's going to be projected out of you. So it gets your attention. And so you get to see like, oh, this is my roadmap. This is my gift and
Mm.
this sense of wholeness and oneness of this, like I can imagine that all like my safety exists in that person or in this amount of money in my bank account or in having this many clients or whatever. You are disempowering yourself through that process, but trusting like I'm still safe regardless of that. And if I question if things are working out or not, it's kind of above my spiritual pay grade, as you say, trusting that the universe is kind as well. And even when you think things aren't working out, they probably are. You just haven't seen enough of the picture to necessarily see why yet. Um, and even hearing your story and the journey that you've been through and the things where it must have felt like, why is this happening? This definitely isn't working out. And then you later get the context to connect the dots looking backwards and see like, wait, I actually had that safety all along. It's like that Wizard of Oz moment. It's like, oh, it was already always in me, right? And when you
Yeah.
see it in that way, it's almost like, oh, my love didn't go because that person wasn't here anymore. Because my love is mine and I get to project this onto everything and everyone. It will never run out. I can project into a relationship, I could project into money, whatever. And
Hmm.
so I love this sense of like, yeah, the safety point. It can be an illusion of like this only exists outside of you. So pulling it back to this self-trust, pulling it back. And I think where I want to pull into more of like the sort of high achieving, high performing women, I think sometimes we can then get the misunderstanding of, well, if I have to be the supplier, I have to be me, then maybe that pushes me into more of like a hyper independent space. So I'm wondering if you can just speak to more of that and also how you see some ways that high performing women can maybe sabotage intimacy when really what they deeply want is love.
Yeah, this is such a great question. And I so feel this because I would consider myself a high achieving woman. I work with a lot of women who are often the only women in a male dominated industry,
Yeah.
whether that be finance or in, top of their real estate or corporate environment. And so they end up, creating this, like you said, this hyper independent way of being, which, if we look at it, is often rooted again into childhood, where maybe they had to grow up really quickly, or maybe they had a lot of responsibility as children, or they had betrayal or mistrust. And so then they create these walls of like, oh, I can't trust anyone else, so must do it on my own, right? Or maybe you have really smothering parents and you were like, I don't want that. I don't want to be like that. I want to be very independent. And so you go the other way. So lots of different reasons why we become high achieving as women. And culturally, we're also kind of taught like you've got to be like men in order to be successful. And so we will often neglect parts of our feminine essence to become more like our male counterparts so that we can be seen as equal, or so that we can get to the top of the ladder of success in society in whatever way that is, right? So the way that I see secure attachment supporting women who are high achieving is that if we create that safety within ourselves, we no longer have to have that armor to protect to keep everyone out. So when you start to learn how to get out of being only operating in your mind, and you learn how to come into the body and create safety from within, the way that I see it, like the word that comes through for me is that there's this softening.
Mm.
And I know that some women are afraid of softening because, oh, then that means I'm vulnerable or I'm weak. And if I'm
Yeah.
vulnerable and weak, then I have to trust other people or rely on other people, or other people are going to think that I'm not independent,
Yeah.
right? And I was thinking the other day about this word vulnerable, because most people, when they hear the word vulnerable, they think weak or too emotional. And when I hear the word vulnerable, I think of courage. I think of, it takes so much courage to be willing to feel. And the more that we're willing to feel these deeper, more uncomfortable emotions, the more that we're actually able to access other emotions like joy and gratitude and connection and bliss.
Yeah.
So really, the inner work of learning how to soften doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries. It doesn't mean that you just become like this wilted flower that people can stomple over. Like, no, that's not what it means. And
Yeah.
the visual that I want to offer that I love is this idea of a woman who has a strong spine and an open, soft heart. That actually is, if you look physiologically, that is someone who feels safe because they're not having to armor up the front and they're not cowarding or like collapsing in the back.
Mm.
So in a postural alignment, and it's interesting because my partner is really into physiology and anatomy. We were having this really cool conversation the other day when we were driving and talking about all these things, attachment theory and anatomy and all these different layers of the nervous system. And he was talking to me about this postural alignment piece and how you
Yeah.
can actually see it physiologically, when people
Mm.
are rigid or really closed off, it's often because they don't feel safe. So, this idea of learning, oh, can I have this strong spine where I trust myself, where I can have boundaries, where I choose who I let in and who I let out, who I share my energy and interact with? But can I live with a soft, open heart, which allows for more connection with yourself, with others? It allows you to give love and receive love. And ultimately, I feel like, you can have all of the financial success and career success, but
Yeah.
if this area of your life is blocked, where your heart is closed off, or you feel shut down to connection, like that sense of deep meaning and fulfillment in life is often lacking for most women. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. So interesting how you say about the posture as well. And I think about some of the sort of archetypes that work with it, and you can really see the rounding and I think I read somewhere it's like the front of your heart relates to the giving, the back relates to the receiving. I
Mm.
don't know how true that is. It's just I heard it, so I wanted to offer it. So how do you can we have some maybe some tangible examples of how women can begin to shift from this space of the sort of like strong, like hyper independent maybe into more presence and into more receiving?
Yeah. So what I'll share is that there isn't a one path for everyone.
Mhm.
And in my book, The Feminine Way, I talk about 7 different feminine codes or feminine principles. Kind of, I like to think of them as they're like these keys that we can unlock something that's already inside of us. So I actually believe that we all, men and women, have feminine energy inside of us. We all
Yeah.
have masculine energy inside of us.
Hmm.
And because we've learned to suppress or neglect our feminine energy, there are different keys and locks that we can use to open up these different spaces. So, there are some core foundations of, does a woman want to connect more with her sensuality? Does she want to connect more with her heart space? Does she want to connect more with her intuition and with self-trust? Does she want to connect more with her purpose and her soul calling, right? These are all different aspects of different doors and avenues that we can go through to unlock these different parts of ourselves that we all have, right? But if we were to simplify it, the way that I think of feminine energy, I think of it as life force energy. I think of it as aliveness, and I think of it as fluid. So if we are constantly in our head, we are constantly in productive mode, go mode, doing mode, and we don't create any space to connect with our breath, connect with our movement, whether that's through dancing or through yoga or whatever way feels good for you to help you to get into your body. If we're not creating space to listen to our inner voice, then we're going to be operating in that hyper masculine way.
Yeah.
So I like to say feminine work is about slowing down and it's about tuning in. And I know people who are used to that productivity mode and achieving and accomplishing, which I so get that. I have that part of me too. And they often will see feminine skills. There really are more soft skills that don't have as much, I don't know, you could say weight as far as like it's not that as glamorous or as you get like a gold star for it, right? However, what we find is actually embracing these more feminine aspects help us to become better leaders. They help us to become more present. They help us to be more efficient because we're honoring both the yin and the yang, the doing and the being.
Mhm.
Right. And one example that I have is a client who she's a financial analyst and she's literally the only woman in the meetings, and she has started to explore her self-expression through sharing her ideas more, speaking up more, through wearing lipstick or wearing certain colors when she is doing a presentation or speaking. And a lot of that has come through connecting with, okay, what feels good for me, and how can I bring my own essence and my own magic to this space that is a more male-dominated industry.
Oh, beautiful. I love these examples. And again, sort of like rooting into that, if I was going to be more authentically embodied, if I was going to trust myself more, if I was going to follow these nudges that life is giving me, then how do I want to show up? And if
Hmm.
you're so fast, you've already kicked in the sort of part of you that's so well practiced. It's like, hey, I got this. I've been doing this since we were like 5 years old. Let me handle this. And then, you've got your 5-year-old in the driver's seat, that it gets to be like, okay, bless these parts of me that have got me this far. Like they did a great job at creating the set about success or love or whatever it was that they wanted for us. And now I choose to create something differently. And so for these women who are like, hey, maybe this attachment style that I had is no longer serving me, moving into more of that secure space, moving into more of that feminine embodiment feels like a really powerful access. So yeah, I want to thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah. And is there anything today that you feel we haven't covered that you would love to touch on before we close out?
Great question. Yeah, I think that there are a lot of different modalities that can be woven into supporting with secure attachment. Things like emotional freedom technique, which is EFT tapping, things
Mhm.
like breath work and understanding even, pranayama, the breath flow to help to regulate and ground your nervous system. Things like getting out in nature to, put your feet on the earth and to ground and root down when you have that anxious energy happening. Other pieces, dancing and movement to help to move the energy through your body, which is something that I love guiding my clients through as well. And then you just mentioned something really key is this, parts work and inner child healing, because ultimately when we don't feel safe, it's because a younger part of us doesn't feel safe. And so if we are able to and have the tools to be able to create that safety through reparenting work, through providing our younger inner self that the safety and the love that maybe you didn't get in the way that you wanted to, we can start to create a new relationship with safety in our nervous system. So these are all different practices and tools that I teach in. I have a 6-week program called Intimate, and then I also do one-on-one work with my clients as well. So there's lots of different ways that I teach these, but I just want to create even more practical, like, there are specific tools that I use anytime I have a conflict with my partner, when I
Yeah.
notice tending towards anxious or avoidance. These are the tools that I use over and over again, and they're so effective. Like I've had clients who, they used to sabotage relationships, or they used to just repeat the same patterns, and they're like, why do I keep attracting the same kind of guy? And now they're attracting so much better quality men into their life, and they're
Yeah.
showing up in a way that they feel proud of. Like that's what I want for all women is to be able to relate in their romantic relationships and their friendships and their business and their career from that place of like deep embodied power. Like I have
Yeah.
the tools, I know what to do when I feel off. I know how to identify that, and I know how to come back home to myself over and over again.
Ah,
Yeah.
I love this. And it just actually brought to mind, you just shared such an incredible like toolbox of like, hey, here's all of these things that you could dive into and explore. And sometimes, especially if you are very heady, you are a neck up kind of person, it's like, I need more information. But actually, when you lean into the transformation of like, how do I work into this from the neck down? This is where you really get these huge shifts that powerfully transform your life and the situations that you experience. Now, Amy put out a post the other day, which I thought was so powerful. And so I want to pull this in as like a tool for us to discuss also. She mentioned about how, like, yes, we have all these things, and sometimes the mind can be like, I wonder what Chat GPT might have to say about this, right? And so, can you share with us a little bit about bringing in AI as well to work through some of the stuff that you might be experiencing in relationships, and whether that is something that you would recommend?
Yeah, great question. So the post that you're referring to is a reel that I made a few weeks ago after moving through a conflict with my partner. And when I say conflict, like the type of dynamic that we have is that we're not yelling, we're not reactive, we're not screaming. We're really bringing forward, oh, these are some differences that we have. These are
Yeah.
things that we disagree on, and we get to work through these things.
Mm,
Now, what I've found for myself and for many women is that we will then, if you feel upset or you feel like a little bit confused, you may go to a tool like ChatGPT. It used to be Google, but as we know, a lot of people are using ChatGPT now almost for, mental health and coaching support. And while there is a lot of really good information, and while you can get some good insights, the problem with a tool like that is that it doesn't know your own history with relationship patterns, and it also doesn't take into account what is happening for the other person. And so oftentimes when we go to a tool like that, it's almost like they're going to, in a way, be your best friend and take your side. And it doesn't have the full picture and it doesn't have all the information to be able to give you accurate and really helpful relationship advice.
mhm.
So when I went in this particular dynamic and this conflict with my partner, I went to ChatGPT and it almost created this even more of this spinning out of like, is this the right relationship for me? Like, am I, am I making a mistake? Like, it took me into this whole analysis that didn't take into account that my partner is actually a really incredible human being, and he shows up incredibly in our relationship. And right now, our inner child and our childhood patterns are both playing out together in this situation. So
Mm,
instead of being like, he's wrong, I'm right, which is ultimately what can happen when you use something like ChatGPT, is like
yeah.
see perspective, which is kind of similar like getting relationship advice from a best friend versus from a professional who is very well versed in these different dynamics. Then what happens is we can have that tunnel vision and we can't see things clearly. Versus, oh, can I learn to understand what's happening for my partner? And can he learn to understand what's happening for me? And can we get to a place of mutual understanding, even if we have differences? And can we respect those differences? And does that feel healthy and aligned for us to continue in our partnership? So
Mm,
super nuanced, and it was a very vulnerable, deep share that I had, and I wanted to share that with people because I do feel like while AI and using the internet can be helpful tools, that it's very, very important that you are looking at this from a wider lens and that you're working with someone like a coach or a mentor or a skilled, I would say, somatic therapist, and what I would go for,
yeah.
to really be able to see, okay, like what's really happening underneath the surface here, and not just from this kind of one-sided perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, such a great breakdown. And I love how you named, with conflict as well. sometimes we can grow with the misunderstanding that conflict is bad. Conflict can actually build a really powerful sense of intimacy and grow a relationship. So I don't want people to be afraid of that. And like, yes, conflict happens in healthy relationships. Of course it does, because we're humans. And if we are always agreeing with each other, then you're just looking in a mirror, right? Then you're just on ChatGPT, right? Who's going to hype you up and agree with you, and sometimes can unintentionally sort of, yeah, to take you down a road you don't want to go in. And in some ways, you mentioned earlier this sort of outsourcing of safety into another person. So that, and again, it could be outsourcing of safety into AI. And AI doesn't have the capacity to say, hey, let me help you navigate your inner world. Let me help you navigate these parts and just see, what within you is looking to be healed through this experience, or more fully integrated, or more fully embodied, and how this dynamic is sort of playing out for you versus making this something of good guy versus bad guy. So yeah, I really loved that post that you shared. It was really powerful and really opened up a lot of great conversation as well. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to like even name it that, we as humans, you mentioned earlier, we are so multidimensional and we're so complex.
Yeah.
And while AI can pull information from a lot of different places, the intricacies of human relating when it comes to even nervous system regulation and really understanding these intricacies, I think there's a limitation there that we won't be able to get unless we're having a human interaction with someone who has seen patterns over and over again and studied them and understands them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. So you mentioned earlier about some one-on-one offerings that you have and some group offerings. I know everyone is going to be so excited to be in your world and learn more about proximity. So where can people find out more? What do you have coming up?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for creating this space. And I loved, everything that you've contributed to this conversation. It feels really rich and insightful. So thank you for creating this space. And yeah, I think, from here, after you've listened to this episode, there's a few free resources that I'd love to guide you to. One is my podcast, the Feminine Frequency Podcast. And then I also have a free guided morning ritual that helps you to connect with your feminine energy and helps you to feel grounded to start your day. So those are both available on my website, amynatalieco.com, and we can also link them in the show notes. And then as far as mentorship goes, I do have some shorter 6-week courses, like I mentioned, intimate earlier. So you can find that on my website. And then I have both one-on-one intensive and then a more group mentorship that I offer twice a year called The Multidimensional Woman, which is all about confidence and self-expression and self-trust and authenticity. So lots of beautiful options. And if you're like, I don't really know where to go or where to start, just send me a message on Instagram. You can let me know what resonated for you from this episode, and we can connect and see what would best support you at this time. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that so much. And yeah, we'll get some stuff in the show notes. And, as Amy mentioned, if this episode did crack something open for you or offered a new lens on love, and somebody who needs to hear this message as well, like, please don't keep this episode to yourself. Take a moment to leave a review, share it on your stories, tag us. It just allows us to really expand and ripple through the rest of the world in helping women to create healthier relationships with themselves, with others, and the most happiness and confidence I've ever experienced. So we can all do with some more of that. But
Mm.
Amy, thank you so much for this conversation. I love your very calm, grounded presence, your power, the embodiment of the work you do. It's just such an inspiration for women everywhere, and it's been an honor to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for sharing your voice and creating this space for women to feel more empowered. And yeah, I'm so grateful to be co-creating with you. So thank you again.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Okay, I just love this episode and I hope that you did too. And if you're a woman in leadership ready to scale your life, love, and legacy from identity, not performance, then Aligned Ascension is your next move. DM me the word ascend on Instagram or check out the show notes for more. Until next time, honeys, honor your truth, embody your leadership, and lead from the love that you are here to hold. Mwah.